So I'm about to meet Joe Reis, the co-author of Fundamental of Data Engineering. And of course I'm running late.
Found him. Yeah, Smitty is running late. Where is he?
Look who I got on the bike.
Hey, what's up? How's it going?
Yo, it's a pleasure.
What's up? Cheers. Good to see you.
Cheers. I'll do a quick intro, and you correct me.
Okay.
If I'm in the good or not. So you are a DJ for a couple of years.
I've been DJing since like the late '90s, early 2000s.
You have a couple of tracks on your SoundCloud, right?
Yeah, a couple old sets, yeah.
And I think that's pretty much it about you, right?
That's it. Yeah, that's all I do. Just make beats.
So of course you're pretty well known for the best-selling book on fundamentals of data engineering.
Yep.
Co-author, right?
Yep.
There is also
Co-author Matt Housley was my co-author.
Matt was the co-author, and you define yourself as a recovering data scientist.
Yep.
We're gonna get there afterwards. And speaker, professor, and of course podcaster, and content creator, of course.
Yeah.
And your famous podcast, Monday Morning Data Chat, has more than 100 episodes, I think. Something like that.
I think the official number is like 124, but we've actually recorded more than that.
Okay. And you start also your own.
So I have my own podcast, the Joe Reis Show. So that's also one. Just because the Monday Morning Data Chat was basically booked until now September.
Yeah.
And so, and I still like doing podcasts and talking to cool people. So I figured I'll just do my own.
Nice.
Yeah.
Amazing. Let's start with something simple. What's the scary thing in data?
The scary thing? Like the scary thing?
Yeah.
Okay. I think the scary thing is often the data itself. So you just never know what you're going to get yourself into with that. I feel like data is usually a kind of a secondary consideration at a lot of companies. And so if you work with, quote, data, you're usually working with the aftermath of a developer maybe, or an API that gives you data, and it may or may not be useful for you, but it's your job to figure out how to make it useful. And so I think that's always the big question mark. Yeah. The other big question mark is, I would say the other scary thing would be, just how are you going to work with the business, and are you going to get buy-in from the business for what you're trying to do?
Yeah.
So, and sometimes, the first part I mentioned the data and the second part, the business, sometimes these are related and sometimes they're not. But I think these are the two big ones I see.
How do you see the importance of good communication for a data engineer and, let's say, like a technical person? How important is that communication there compared, I would say, to a standard software engineer role, let's say, as a front end for a mobile app?
So data is it's basically the same, I think, as software, but it has sort of after effects too, because data is it's more disparate in its use cases. So you might be using it for reports, you might be using it for a model, you might be using it for this, that, or the other thing. And so I think that's like the big difference, is just how are stakeholders going to receive and perceive the utility of the data that they're getting. That's, I think, the big difference. But stakeholder management is one of these things where I think it just exists up and down the data lifecycle. Whether you're a software engineer, I mean, it exists outside of data as well. It's just like that's part of your job, is to do stakeholder management. But how that's done at a company or on a team, I think it really depends on that company and that team. There's not really a standard way to do it. But in our book, each chapter we talk about who you work with.
Yeah.
At the end of each life cycle chapter. So it's like, so we cover basically, okay, so just be considerate of like who's upstream and downstream for you. And here's some things that you should look for, maybe know about their needs. They should know about your needs. I think that's the big mistake I see with a lot of data teams, is there's not that kind of cross communication with the upstream and downstream users. And so. Yeah.
And I think it might be also, and you did that pretty well in the book. I really like it at the beginning. There's a lot of context, a lot of terminology. And I think that's the biggest challenge in the data world, is that there is so much volleying terminology that people get lost. There is a manager coming from other side, and I was working in data.
Happens a lot.
And be able to navigate to that, like I think it's it's helping a lot to say, okay, this is your role, this is how I communicate with you, and actually I should communicate with you because you were mentioning earlier, people getting data from an API, they might change some stuff and not discuss downstream because they're not aware of like the usage of it.
Yeah, they typically don't know and often aren't incentivized to care.
Yeah.
So that's the other part. Like, do you have incentives? If you're an upstream producer of data, do you have incentives to care about the downstream users of your data? Often not. You're incentivized by your sprint if you're a software engineer. Which doesn't typically include working with the data team. Well, and if it does, it's just like, we'll get you data, then it's your problem. So, so it's interesting. I see this changing though, slowly but surely, but it's still it's a big, scary thing.
How do you see that changing? Why is that there is a trend?
I think because, applications in general are becoming more, quote, data powered. So the feedback loop between data is going back into the application now. And so I think that's forcing software engineers to, I think, be cognizant and work with the data team rather than just sort of lob it over the wall. But lobbing it over the wall still happens, I would say, more times than not, though.
Going through that here, where you define yourself as a recovering data scientist, why is that so?
I got hooked on data. I made some bad choices in my life, and but I'm getting better. I just take it day by day, and hopefully I'll be off data soon. No, I mean, what I saw, in my career doing quote data science, which I actually have no idea what that is anymore, but all too often what I saw is companies would hire people like me to do machine learning and jump straight into the fancy stuff.
Yeah.
But I noticed there was no infrastructure built typically to facilitate machine learning. Often no data upon which to do science. So often I felt like data scientists were set up to fail, and I still feel this is the case. I mean, I was talking to a bunch of people, machine learning engineers and data scientists, and I think half of them said, I've been hired, but I really don't have a clear directive or data.
Yeah.
But we've been hired because this is the initiative. It's the hot thing to do, so let's do it. So I became a recovering data scientist because I just felt like the notion of data science is a bit abused and overblown, and I think over exaggerated. At the same time, there's really cool stuff that's being done with data science, obviously, but my personal experience was such that I got kind of jaded on it. Yep. And that's how I got into data engineering, just out of necessity because I had to do my job. So,
but there is a lot of kids like this. I've known countless of like data engineers that come from data science.
Yeah.
It was like inevitable for them because they spend most of their time doing, data pipeline cleaning.
Yeah.
They start to enjoy it, and they say, okay, at the end, that could be my job full time.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you see that a lot. Some people actually like the engineering more.
Yeah.
Some people don't, and that's fine. I mean, but it's, what I realized is the more foundational data engineering is, to facilitate data science and analytics. The opposite isn't true. Like, you couldn't really hire a data scientist, and expect awesome things just to happen without that core foundation.
Yeah.
You can get some like probably exploratory data analysis out of it, and I think start getting an understanding of your data, but that's not really the same thing as like productionizing. But you also learn what you can productionize, I suppose, by doing the exploration. So, but in that case, if you're just exploring for the sake of it to find data stuff to do, then I would say that your company who hired you probably was maybe a bit misguided.
Yeah.
In terms of what they're trying to accomplish. So.
But it's difficult, like also for a company to know their data maturity. You talking a bit of that on your book, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a really nice concept. There is also another company that put like a test on how mature you are with a few questions.
They test your company or you as a person?
No, basically you as a company, you go there and you do the test, and it's a few questions to say how mature you are compared to the average. And I think like it's a reality check that some companies start to have now. Maybe that's why data engineering start to explode, because they say, we cannot have 10 data scientists and just one data engineer.
Yeah, and maturity assessments are interesting too, because I sometimes feel like some of them are good, and then some of them are obviously have a bias towards getting you to sign as a as a contract. So it's interesting, but I feel like the things I look for is like what results are you really achieving no matter your size of the team, right? Because I've seen like small teams be super effective, like SEAL Team 6 level, and giant teams be just absolutely like, ineffective.
What would be the first data role you would suggest to hire for a startup?
I think it depends on the type of product and service that the startup's providing.
Okay, let's say like a standard mobile app for B2C customer.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. So I think you need somebody who, I mean, so you obviously want to be able to track, core metrics for success. And so that's probably the first person I'd be hiring, is somebody who's able to help drive the product, assuming it's a product-led growth company, somebody who's able to drive those types of metrics. Because that's really quantifiable and it has a direct impact on the business, right? So building in the feedback loops within the app to, collect those metrics and help tune the behavior of the app itself for a better customer experience. I think that's the kind of person I would hire first, whoever that is.
So more a product like hat person with a data background that's comfortable to navigate to this.
Yeah. I think just developing, you really want to develop that flywheel in your application early, so you can drive success. And if that were the company that I had started, that's probably the person whatever that role is, right? I just need that person to do that thing. I don't know what it's called.
Yeah.
Product, data, scientist, engineer, unicorn person or something. But it's like, you know what I'm saying? But I always find like that you're productive as a quote data person when you can tie data directly back to making your product or service better.
Yeah.
In a positive direction. So
let's talk a bit about your book. Why did you first start writing a book?
Boredom. No, I'm just kidding. I felt like, I don't know, for a long time, Matt and I talked about writing a book, and I'd always wanted to write one. It was kind of the COVID project. So some people got a dog, which I also did. Some people, learned to bake bread, and Matt and I decided to write a book. So.
But only a best-selling book. That's what you said.
Well, yeah, obviously, no. O'Reilly, it was funny. So O'Reilly, when we originally pitched the idea, they actually told us not to write the book because they said it was going to be really hard. Because you're trying to describe an entire field, right? Yeah. So that was what was really fascinating. But we ultimately convinced him, look, we're going to do this with or without you. So, it seems to exist. It'll be great for your portfolio. And they agreed. So we ultimately did it. And it was a great, great process of writing. And, O'Reilly's got a world-class development team. And so I was really pleased by it. But, what we really wanted to do was write a book, I would say, that could stand the test of time as much as you can in technology.
Yeah.
Things change, but we didn't want to write, data engineering with, platform X, Y, or Z, or technology A, B, C, or something like that. Like, that's already been done. And those books have an expiration date.
Yeah.
The hard part was really unpacking, in 5 to 10 years, what's not going to change. And so that's where we came with the idea of the life cycle. I can't say it's like a novel idea, but it was like a very obvious one that I didn't see people talking about. The undercurrents was maybe a bit more interesting. So you focus on across the life cycle, what's not going to change. As far as security, for example, you probably want to do that everywhere, data management, architecture, and engineering and so forth. So it was an interesting thought process. It really forced you to understand the field in a way that I hadn't seen people think about or describe.
And in that sense, why did you learn after writing the book, aside from the writing experience and so on as a writer, but more on the data thing? Did you have a aha moment because you have to do a lot of research,
there was a lot of research.
to bridge the gap that's from your experience. What was the biggest learning?
The biggest learnings, you just find out how much you don't know, I think, when you're writing a book, right? You think you know going into writing a book that, this will be cake, I know data engineering, and you come to find out you probably don't know, much at all. That was my impression. I think Matt felt the same way, and it's not like we came into it as absolute buffoons who didn't know anything. I'd been doing this for a while, but it really pushed our limits and pushed us to, challenge our thoughts. And one of the things we did to help write the book too is we did, the Monday morning data chat, podcasting. That was one of the motives for doing that was we get to talk to smart people, understand what makes them think, and their thoughts and what makes them tick, and hopefully get some ideas that we could use in the book, as well as challenge some of the ideas we had too. I can't tell you how many times we're we're totally wrong on this, and because of this discussion or because of this thing we read, like, changed our mind. So I think the thing you got to do is have very flexible thinking, and be willing to leave your ego at the door because you're going to get. And the other thing I liked about it too was so when you write a book, you get technical reviewers.
Yeah.
So we had a giant bench of these people, but you want to find people who are going to beat the crap out of you. Pretty hard.
Yeah.
So you don't want people who are going to be light, because the internet is like a much darker and harsher place than your reviewer is going to be. So, so we found people who were just borderline, definitely on the spectrum of just like being very blunt and harsh. So, but you want that.
Yeah. That was nice. So really the podcasts help you drive the content of the
Absolutely.
book.
Yeah.
And part of the research, right? Each
Big time.
podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you go into a podcast with the idea that you're going to learn something from somebody, which is what I always do, and it's why I like doing it, then, I think it's a healthy attitude to have.
Yeah.
So.
Wait, would you recommend someone that's like into tech content at some point to write a book or not? Because it's a really tedious. Right,
I think if you have the time and you have the disposition to do it, and I think the persistence and commitment to want to do a book, then sure. It's not for everybody, and I would say like most people probably shouldn't do a book. It's so much work.
Yeah.
So, like it's going to be about a year commitment, at minimum. Maybe you can write it sooner, but typically it's like it's just a giant chunk of your time. So what's the opportunity cost?
Okay.
That's how I look at it. So.
And what would be the first advice you would give to someone that would like to write a technical book?
Try and find an angle. So try and find an angle that's different, right? And that's uniquely yours. So try and fill out a book proposal template. Like O'Reilly has those. Just fill them out, even if you're going to self-publish. I think it forces you to think through the business plan of your book.
Okay.
What is it? Who's it for? What are the competing titles? Why are you the person to write this? Who's the audience? So. Yeah, I would say go through that process and then be open about your idea. I think a lot of people try and hide their ideas and like, somebody's going to take them. Nobody's going to steal your idea. Trust me. It's like nobody's going to write a book on your idea.
It's like startups, right? So it's you better.
Your idea is the easiest thing in the universe. Execution is the hard part. And like, trust me, nobody's going to write a book. Yeah. It's so much work. Because I meet people like, I can't give away the idea for my book. And I'm like, you can act that way. Right, you can be secretive, but let me tell you, like nobody's gonna knock it off anyway.
Yeah.
So what is it? And in fact, you want to have your ideas challenged, right? That's why I've been open about the new book I'm writing on data modeling. It's like challenge the ideas.
Yeah.
So I'm talking to like a lot of the top people in the world in data modeling, and that's forced me to challenge a lot of my ideas about the book, and I think it's going to make it better as a result. If I came into it with my ego, maxed out, and I would say, I know exactly what needs to be written, it's like. You could, but I think nowadays content's a bit different. It's a lot more about community involvement in some degree. At least I think so. You can have novel ideas, but I think that you can iterate a lot quicker if you get feedback on them. Yeah, versus like locking yourself away and But it's the same with like other types of content, right? So if you're gonna make a course, if you're gonna, so I would say like start cheap, like make posts.
Yeah.
On LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever.
And then start to connect the dots.
Connect the dots and test the ideas out. So, I've been having some friends do this with a book they want to write. I'm like, why don't you just test parts of the idea out, see who's interested in this, what's the pushback. Don't invest, the thing you don't want to do is invest a bunch of time into a book and then release it.
Yeah.
Because without getting any feedback.
And does your publisher already advise you on this, or is mostly like you coming out with the new way of because I feel like there is like really an old way of writing a book.
Yeah.
And like new way, like as you mentioned, where it's more coming from the community. They've been posting and logging, and they say, okay, I'm gonna recap kind of what I've been doing
I think I take a different approach than traditional publishers. Because talking to some people who've been editors for a long time, and I just think I have a different opinion about how books should be written these days. The approach I take, we mentioned DJing earlier. It's like I take very much like one of my friends mentioned, like you promote your book like a club promoter.
Yeah,
that's because I used to do that. So it's like you hustle and you think of different ways to to get the word out, right? And it's like. It's probably an approach nobody's really done. I know other authors that have, but it's like you got to be nimble and you got to be different these days. There's so many books and so many ideas, And the thing is, people don't read as much.
Yeah.
Right, so you gotta give people a reason to care. What and again, that's
I'm guilty.
yeah. Well, then but it's like if you're making a course, it's the same kind of thing. Like cutting through the noise is huge. So I think you just need to be like really fine tuned. And the thing is, like LinkedIn, you can get analytics on your posts, like who's looking at it, how many views, and also like titles, company, geography.
Yeah, so you can do way more fast iteration on that rather than. Yeah, for me, what was always like scary of writing a book is that kind of a one shot, as you mentioned. Like, if I look at classic publishing, like, okay, you write the book and it's out there, while like having a newsletter or blog post, you can iterate, change the topic, say what works. I tend to find really your voice, your way of writing, and then I feel like writing a book after that, like when I write like so much blogs and so on, then it's like. There is little failure, risk of failure. Plus, you have an audience that that like, there is a couple of fans that will anyway buy the book.
That's just it. And so the next book I'm writing, I'm probably going to start releasing early versions of the chapters on Substack.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Right. So you can build an audience that way.
Yeah.
You can kind of get proof of what's working, what's not, and start building a community around the idea.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I saw Steven Sinofsky did this. So he was a guy that worked at Microsoft back in the day, and he wrote Hardcore Software, which is the history of working at Microsoft on like Word and Office products and stuff. And I thought it was brilliant. He wrote the whole book on Substack.
Okay. Yeah.
It was awesome. So that's an approach, and I think I'm gonna try it out. So I'm like, it was interesting last night. As a quick aside, like I was in Munich, hanging out at this club with this DJ named DJ Hell. If you know who he is, he's like 60 years old now, but he was the first DJ in Germany and I believe in Europe. So he was like single-handedly the guy that created like this whole dance music scene that you have now.
Okay.
So we sat from there for like an hour just talking about like, creativity and staying relevant. And that was so cool because he had some really good advice. And it's something I believe in too, which is like, you constantly have to be reinventing what you're doing and pushing yourself into scary areas. And, and that's how you stay relevant. You don't stay relevant over time by doing the same stuff.
Doing podcast outside.
Yeah.
Next to the boat.
So that's one thing I will tell the audience too is like, you got to remember there's about 5 to 10% of people who no matter what will just hate you.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, they just want to see you fail. And you just got to get used to it. No matter what you do, like somebody's going to hate it. Somebody's going to hate you personally. And like the sooner you can accept that and move on, the better off you'll be. So.
Yeah. What's your reading strategy today?
Reading?
Yeah. Reading strategy to stay up to date in the data words. Yeah.
I read a bunch of articles, so I usually queue up like probably 30 to 50 articles on my iPad and just read them over a weekend. Although I have a spin bike now, so I'm back at home, we'll just set it there for an hour. I'll just like plow through, anywhere from 5 to 10 articles. So on books, I'm probably reading like 1 to 2 books a week.
Wow. Okay.
So I read really fast. I do have very high comprehension as well, but it's something I've always done. I'm just if you looked at my office or my Kindle, there's like thousands of books on the Kindle, and it's like my floor is like littered with books. It's pretty disgusting, actually.
How do you sort like really good content, and like what would be the advice to someone starting, their data carrier and they want to stay up to date?
I would say study wisely and read widely too. Like don't be afraid of articles. I would say you'll know within the first minute or two whether this article is going to click with you or not. But I would say be pretty ruthless with you don't need to finish it. Just get the core ideas. Skim through it first. Understand if it contains something useful to you.
Yeah, that's like often like when I can understand most of the article just with the title and the subtitle.
Yeah.
I felt like okay, that's interesting to read.
Yeah.
And then go deeper.
It's just weird. There's a lot of clickbait though, right? So people people go like, the 10 ways to become the type Python programmer in the world or something like that. And it's like, but you never know until you read. Then again, there's articles that were, the GPT-3 paper was interesting to read, but that was called like, like a few shot learning or something like that, like something that's very unintuitive, but that changed the world, right? So you just never know like what you're going to run into. I do read a lot of white papers too. So I think that's like the one thing where I differ from a lot of people is I read articles, but I read white papers.
Actually not the first one I heard, and I think it's really interesting. Like one advice I received was like, take a few white papers, and if you don't understand everything, it's okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's what scares people. Is like, okay, I don't have a PhD to read this, but I think a lot of time you can get some idea out of it. And
Yeah. What's the source? So I mean, I tend to learn from first principles, right? So it's, you know, with transformers, you know, for example, go read the original 2017 Google paper.
Yeah.
You'll understand transformers. Read the GPT papers, and now you pretty much understand like what's going on in the generative AI world, you know, at an atomic level. I think that's how I learn, because I think if you can learn from first principles, you have a foundation upon which to build, you know, a body of knowledge. But you know, that's the hard part too, especially when you're starting out in your career, because you want to, you don't know where to begin, and it's intimidating, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't know where to start. But I would say just don't be afraid to dive in and read widely too. Like read, you know, stuff in computer science, read stuff even in like front-end development. Like, you know, I still read like JavaScript articles just because I'm interested.
Yeah.
It's cool.
And me too. Like, what other advice would you give to someone starting his data engineering career aside from reading widely?
Get my book and but you know, starting on a data engineering career, you know, find good support group, find a mentor maybe, and you know, just be patient. I mean, the process is long, and you know, just understand knowledge accumulates over time, the skills accumulate over time, and it's like compound interest. Like the gains you see on day one are it'll be small.
Yeah.
It'll be frustratingly tiny, and so you just got to know that over time, if you put in the work, you're gonna see the payoff. Also build your network. Like that's a big one where I'd say like your network is your net worth, as the old cliche goes, but it's very true.
Yeah.
Like the opportunities that'll be given to you in your career are typically not you going and applying for a job. It's like people saying, hey, there's a job over here. Are you interested? Right? Set yourself up so opportunities find you. You know, building a network, building your knowledge, building your skills, and building a good reputation. That's the other piece too, where it's like your reputation is everything in this world, and you have to do everything you can to like maintain that reputation and build it. You know, as Warren Buffett says, it takes, you know, decades to build a reputation, and it takes it, you know, a few minutes to destroy it. So
there is one thing I want to ask,
sure,
because you're from the US,
Yeah.
from Europe. So I heard the US innovates and the EU regulates.
yeah.
So what's your thoughts about that?
I think that, you know, I've been spending more time in Europe, and I think the differences between the US and the EU are very stark. The US moves fast. I would say the US also is the land of extremes. It's very high and very low. There's not really a middle ground. Whereas here it feels like it's more kind of even keeled. You guys don't go that fast. You guys move probably slower than I would like, but it is what it is. You know, it was interesting. You know, at the conference I was speaking at, one of the Parliament members of the EU was talking about you know, GDPR2 that's coming out soon. So that was an interesting take, I would say, on, you know, the European way of regulating artificial intelligence and data. One thing I think I heard him say was that, you know, every data set had to be unbiased.
Wow, yeah.
Which I was like, I mean, that sounds nice in theory, but I have no idea how you're going to either detect that or enforce this. And so things like that, I feel, are
We're still understanding how GDPR 1 is working.
most people are, right? And so that's the whole thing where I feel like, you know, in the US, I'm sure we're going to have our own AI regulation, but, you know, it'll be lobbied to death by all the big companies. And so it's different, but you know, there's some things I really like about, you know, Europe as well, but I feel like there's definitely a lot more regulation, which I think has its pros and cons, you know, and just like the US is, I would say, you know, lack of regulation in most cases, it also has its pros and cons. It's just, I wouldn't say anyone's better than the other. It's just different ways of approaching things. So
Thanks you very much for,
thank you.
for your time. It's very really fun. Enjoy your rest.
Good luck out there.
Yeah.